Section 384, debentures, annual return, registration of charges, books of accounts, and the inspection. Section is very easy. This chapter is about foreign companies. So section 384 just says that all the provisions for issue of debentures, for submitting annual return, for registration of charges, maintenance of books of accounts, and inspection of them, as applicable to Indian companies, will be applicable to foreign companies also. That is what this section says. That's it. So basically, this section says that whatever is applicable to Indian companies in case of these provisions will be mutatis mutandis applicable to foreign companies as well. So provisions of section 71, issue of debentures shall apply mutatis mutandis to foreign companies. That is what they have said. Then provisions of section 92. This is for preparation of annual return. So every Indian company needs to submit annual return giving information about the company to the ROC within 60 days of the AGM. So same way, foreign company also has to submit. Also, section 135 will be applicable. CSR, corporate social responsibility, will be applicable to foreign companies. Because if you read section 135, they say all companies. They have never said private or public. They said all companies. All companies having net profit of 5 crore or more, net worth of 500 crore or more, or turnover of 1000 crore or more. Then section 135 will be applicable. So compulsorily you have to do CSR activities by setting up a CSR committee. So even foreign companies covered. So every foreign company shall prepare and file annual return in form FC4. Form is different for foreign companies, FC4, along with prescribed fees. Whenever you submit anything to the ROC, you have to pay fees as well within a period of 60 days from the last day of its financial year to the ROC, containing particulars that should be there in the annual return. Return means information. So annual return contains information about the company for the year. That is how many board meetings were conducted, how many shareholders meetings, and other things done during the year. Similarly, section 128 talks about books of accounts. What are the books of accounts to be maintained by Indian company? Similarly, it is applicable to foreign company. So company has to maintain all the records of sales, purchase, asset, liabilities. Obviously, all the books of accounts. But regarding the business in India, so because foreign companies, when they are doing business in India, so regarding their Indian operations, they have to maintain books of accounts. Ishan is joining. Provisions of section 128, books of accounts to be kept by company, shall apply to foreign company to the extent of requiring it to keep at its principal place of business in India the books of accounts referred to in that section with respect to monies received and spent, sales purchase made, asset liabilities in the course of or in relation to business in India. So foreign company will have to maintain books of accounts regarding the monies received, the money spent, income expenditure, sales purchase, assets liabilities regarding the Indian operation. Then fourth is chapter 6, which talks about registration of charges. Whenever an Indian company takes a loan, which is a secured loan, so it takes a loan by mortgaging or pledging its assets. So that is, the loan creates a charge on the asset. So that charge has to be registered with the ROC to make it effective. Only when the charge is registered, it is effective, it is valid. And the public also come to know, because whenever you submit anything with the ROC, it becomes public. So registration of charges, the provisions as are applicable to Indian company will be applicable in the same way to foreign company. And the chapter inspection, inquiry, investigation, as was applicable to Indian company, will be applicable mutatis mutandis to foreign company also. So this is a very basic section. Today, all the basic sections are there. So section 384, the whole provision can be understood from the heading, the title only. There was a chapter called Interpretation of Statutes in CA Inter, Interpretation of Statutes in CA Inter. There it was said that sometimes you can interpret a provision using its title or interpret a section using its title only. So this is that case. So from the name only. So what it says that the provisions for debentures, provisions for annual return, provisions for registration of charges, provisions for books of accounts, provisions for CSR, provisions for inspection, inquiry, investigation, as are applicable to Indian company, will be mutatis mutandis in the same way applicable to foreign company. That is what this section says. It is that simple. So the heading is the section. Then again, this is also the heading is very clear. Section 385. By this time, you must know that whenever we submit any document with the ROC, you need to pay fee. So whenever you register any document with the ROC, you need to pay some fee. This is what the section is all about. They have said that whenever any document is submitted with the ROC, whatever fee the ROC says, you have to pay. And nowadays, everything is online. So you have to pay online. So there shall be paid to the registrar for registering any document required by the provisions of this chapter to be registered by him, such fee as may be prescribed. That's what they say. And the second part says, according to the rules, the fee to be paid to the registrar for registering any document relating to foreign company shall be as such provided in the rules. The rules will say how much fees is to be paid. They will update that with time. Then this section 386 talks about few words they have given and how to read those words. Certified, basically in normal case, you have to submit certified copies of the resolution or of the MOA or of the AOA, certified copy. Certified copy is basically a copy, a Xerox signed. That is a certified copy. Or in foreign company case, you will be submitting certified copies of MOA, AOA, that is there. So the directors might sign it and send it to the ROC for registration. Also, it might include a translation in English language if it was not in English language. So a translation in English language, again certified, signed by directors. Director in case of foreign company includes, it is an inclusive definition. So anyone who is appointed as director, they are the directors, plus includes any person with whose directions or instructions the board is accustomed to act. So even that person is a director. So if there is some person on whose advice the whole board is functioning, that person is also deemed as a director in case of foreign company. Now, place of business, POB, which we were discussing yesterday. POB, they are saying, again, they have widened the definition. They say ki place of business includes even a share transfer office or a share registration office. So even if a foreign company, that is a company incorporated outside India, they just have a share transfer office in India or a share registration office in India. Maybe they have issued shares in India or other securities. So they have set up a share transfer office or a share registration office in India. That is also a place of business. So still they will be deemed as a foreign company. So that cover that is included in the place of business in India. So if a company incorporated outside India has a share transfer office in India, still we will say if they have a place of business in India and they are conducting business in India. So that is an inclusive definition. So there is an example they have given here, so which might be asked in the exam as well. So such question can come. Examine with reference to the provisions of the Companies Act whether the following companies can be treated as foreign companies. So you have to just say whether yes or not along with the provisions, whatever you know about foreign companies. First case, a company incorporated outside India having share registration office at Mumbai. Just now we saw that place of business includes share registration office. So yes, it is a foreign company. So we will have to give the definition of foreign company. What is the definition of foreign company? And then we'll write, in this case, place of business also includes share registration or transfer office. So in this case, the company having share registration office in Mumbai will be a foreign company. Second case is Indian citizens incorporated a company in Singapore for the purpose of carrying on business there. Now, Indian citizens, citizens of India, people like you and me, they started a company, they incorporated a company in Singapore. Now, that doesn't come under definition of foreign company, because in foreign company, what it is said, that company incorporated outside India, has a place of business in India, does business in India. So this is incorporated outside India and it is doing business there only, carrying on business there. So it must have a place of business there only. So it is not coming under definition, because incorporate outside India ho sakta hai, but it should have a place of business in India. It should be doing business in India. So incorporated by Indian citizens का कुछ point नहीं है यहाँ पे. So second company is not covered. So as we discussed, पहले definition आएगा कि what is a foreign company. So means any company which is incorporated outside India, has a place of business outside India, sorry, has a place of business in India, conduct business in India. And then we will say that place of business includes share transfer or registration office. So accordingly, in case 1, it is a foreign company. In case 2, it is not a foreign company. Then dating of prospectus particulars to be contained therein. Now, foreign companies, or you can say companies incorporated outside India, they can issue shares and securities in India. Okay. So foreign companies can issue share securities in India by issuing a prospectus. So the rule is ki if you are issuing shares and other securities in India, you need to issue prospectus. And the most important part is that the prospectus should be dated. And that is there even in case of Indian companies. So prospectus to be valid has to be dated and signed. So if prospectus doesn't contain a date, then it is invalid. So similarly, it is not signed by directors for issuing that. Again, it is invalid. Plus all the provisions of prospectus which are applicable to Indian companies are also applicable to foreign company prospectus. So it has to be true. It should not state any untrue facts. And all the liabilities, civil liabilities, criminal liabilities for issuing untrue prospectus or deceiving the public to invest in your company or defrauding them will be applicable to even a foreign company prospectus. So if there is some mischief there while issuing prospectus, they were trying to defraud the investors, or they had done some untrue statement in the prospectus, given some untrue statement, then every person named in the prospectus will be liable. And liabilities will be both civil, the shareholders can sue you for damages, and criminal also. So government can also sue you for imprisonment. Prospectus to be dated and signed, section 387 subsection 1. So subsection 1 says that no person shall issue, circulate or distribute in India any prospectus offering to subscribe for securities of a company incorporated or to be incorporated. So they are even covering a foreign company which is yet to be incorporated. So while incorporation, they are issuing securities in India. Whether the company has or has not established, they might have or might not have established any of place of business in India, or when formed will or will not establish a place of business in India. They might have in future or might not even have a place of business in India unless the prospectus is dated and signed. So what they are saying here is that company incorporated outside India or to be incorporated, they can issue securities in India, or a company which is incorporated outside India which has or has not established a place of business in India, or on formation of a foreign company outside India, they might not even establish a place of business in India. So even these companies, so who don't have a place of business in India, can also issue securities in India. Generally, they are called Indian depository receipts, which we'll be studying later. So they need not have a place of business in India to issue securities in India. So they cannot issue securities unless the prospectus is dated and signed. That is what the provision is. So they are covering everything. So not only foreign companies, that is incorporated outside India, having a place of business in India, doing business in India, they are definitely covered. But also a company which is yet to be incorporated outside India, they are in the process. They can also issue prospectus after incorporation, but it has to be dated and signed. Similarly, a company incorporated outside India, whether they have a place of business in India or not, they can still issue prospectus in India, but it has to be dated and signed to get securities, to issue securities for money. And contains particulars with respect to the following matters, namely, the prospectus should contain such matters. Firstly, instrument constituting or defining the constitution of the company. So basically the MOA, AOA, enactments or provisions by or under which the incorporation of the company was effected, under what act the company was incorporated, address in India where the said instrument or provisions or enactments or copies thereof, and if the same are not in English language, a certified translation thereof can be inspected. So they should give a place. If they don't have any office in India, they should give a place where the investors can go come and inspect all this. The date on which and the country in which the company would be or was incorporated. The country in which they will be incorporated, if not yet incorporated, or are incorporated. And the date and the country, basically. Whether the company has an established place of business in India, and if so, the address. If it has a place of business, the address of that place. And any other matters as required under the rule. Now they are saying point number 1, 2, 3. Point number 1, 2, 3 is what? Instrument constituting the constitution or defining the constitution of the company, the enactments under which the company was incorporated, address where the people can come and inspect that. So these three things won't be necessary, shall not apply in case the company is already 2 years old. In case the prospectus is issued more than 2 years after date at which the company is entitled to commence business. So already 2 years old companies, then the first 3 points won't be applicable. Then basically prospectus should not contain any term or condition which might state that the applicants are waiving of any of the above provisions. For example, the prospectus shall not state any term which means that the applicants don't want to look into the MOA, AOA, they don't want to see the enactments or the provisions under which the company is incorporated. They won't be inspecting the documents. They don't want to know the date or the country in which it is incorporated, or they don't want to know whether there is a place of business in India and the address. So something like that. So any condition requiring or binding on applicant for securities to waive compliance with any requirements imposed by virtue of section 387 subsection 1. So in the prospectus itself, they are saying in a way that applicants are not wanting that the company should comply with 387 subsection 1. Subsection 1 is that. So any such condition which waives the compliance of 387 subsection 1, they are saying in the prospectus ki applicants are okay even if the company doesn't comply with this. That is wrong. Similarly, any contract or documents not disclosed in the prospectus will not be binding on the applicants. So you cannot say ki uh, So you cannot have some term in the prospectus stating that the applicants are okay with this contract. They are liable with this contract, or this contract or document will be binding on the applicants, because you never mentioned that in the prospectus. So you cannot just attribute any contract or document to them in the prospectus. So sometimes what happens is that in the prospectus they make some provisions which later will be binding on the applicants, and they say you should have read the prospectus, everything was there, but they never disclosed it completely. So if such a thing is done in the prospectus, then it won't be binding. So they are saying any condition requiring or binding on applicant for securities, so anyone who is applying under the prospectus, to waive compliance with 387 subsection 1, or purporting to impute him, that is to attribute him with notice of any contract, documents, or matters not specifically referred in the prospectus shall be void. They are saying ki, uh, any term in the contract which might have the effect of giving a notice of any contract, document, or any matter which can bind the applicant without being disclosed properly in the prospectus shall be void. So if you want to bind an applicant by any contract or document, then you should disclose that contract or document completely in the prospectus so that the applicants will be bound. If you don't disclose it and you directly say that he is bound by the contract without him knowing about it, then it is void. Then form of application for securities to be issued along with prospectus. This is again a very basic provision that they are saying whenever an application form is issued, it has to be attached with the prospectus. So in normal Indian company section, it is called abridged prospectus. Abridged prospectus is basically a prospectus which is attached with the form, and the prospectus is a summary prospectus. It is not a complete prospectus. If the applicant wants a complete prospectus, they can go to the company website, or they can send a notice to the company that I want the prospectus. So generally they are talking about abridged prospectus. So basically every application form should be attached with a prospectus. So later they can tear it off and submit to the company. So they are saying no person shall issue to any person in India application form for securities of such company or intended company, maybe company is yet to be formed, unless the form is issued with prospectus which complies with the provisions of this chapter, and such issue does not contravene the provisions of 380. That is the next section. Some provisions have to be complied before issuing of prospectus, which we'll be studying later. So basically, application form should be attached with prospectus. So you cannot issue just the application form. But you can just issue application form to underwriters. Underwriters are people who will be guaranteeing your share issue. So exception is that if it is shown that the form of application was issued in connection with a bona fide, a genuine invitation to a person to enter into an underwriting agreement. So underwriters, so you can issue just a form. So they must have already studied the prospectus. Also, this section 387, the provisions won't apply to existing members or debenture holders who are already holding similar shares. So for example, if a company is doing a right issue or a further public offer by issuing existing members only and existing bench holders, and they are already holding the same type of shares and debentures, then 387 won't be applicable, except that it should be dated. That dated and signed, that has to be there. So 387 subsection 4 provides that the provisions of section 387 shall not apply to issue to existing members or debenture holders of a company, of prospectus, or form of application relating to securities of the company. Whether an applicant for securities will or will not have the right to renounce in favor of other persons. So generally, when a right issue is done, the existing members are offered shares in some ratio, 1:1, 1:2, whatever. So they are also given the right to renounce. That if you don't want to take up the shares, you can give it to someone else. You can renounce the right. So that right might be there or might not be there. But still, section 387 will not apply to existing members or debenture holders if the same shares are issued to them. So the rule for prospectus and form of application won't be applicable to them, except in so far as it requires a prospectus to be dated. So dated to hona chahiye. That is what makes the prospectus valid. To the issue of prospectus relating to securities which are or are to be in all respects uniform with securities previously issued. So they are same securities which are already issued. So they are already holding some equity shares, and similar equity shares are issued. And for the time being, dealt in or quoted on a recognized stock exchange, and they are already listed on the stock exchange. They are also quoted. So if that's the case, then Section 387 won't be applicable. So basically, what they are saying, that Section 387 won't be applicable if the company, the foreign company, is issuing similar type of securities which are already listed on the stock exchange to its existing members or debenture holders to a right issue with the right of renounce or without right of renounce, except that the prospectus should be dated and the securities are similar to what were issued earlier. But for others, Section 387 shall apply to prospectus and form of application. But subject to aforesaid that apart from this, Section 387 shall apply to a prospectus or form of application, whether issued on or with reference to the formation of a company or subsequently. So on formation or after they are issuing, 387 will apply to other cases. Plus, nothing in this section shall limit or diminish any liability which any person may incur under any other law for the time in force or the companies as certain apart from 387. So if a person doesn't comply with this provision of 387, that is, a foreign company doesn't comply, then whatever penalties are given under this section will apply, plus whatever other penalties might apply under other sections will also continue. So this section doesn't stop or limit other penalty sections. That is what they are saying. So just going through this provision 387, what it says, first subsection says that prospectus should be dated and signed. That is what the provision says. Okay. And it should contain particulars regarding the instrument regarding the company's constitution, that is the MOA. Then what are the provisions under which, what is the act under which the company was incorporated, address where these documents can be inspected by the applicants, then date on which and the company or the date on which or the country in which the company was incorporated or is to be incorporated, if they are side by side incorporating the company, and whether the company has a place of business in India, if so, the address. Point 1 and 1, 2, 3 won't be applicable. 1, 2, 3 is these points. Won't be applicable if the company is already doing business for 2 years. No waiver of compliance in prospectus. So prospectus should not contain any term or condition which might affect a waiver of compliance of section 387 subsection 1. So it might state that the applicant is waiving off the compliance of section 387 subsection 1, that he doesn't want the company to disclose everything, he's okay with it, he'll still apply. That is wrong. That is, he is like giving up his rights. Secondly, if the contract document are not disclosed in the prospectus, they cannot be binding on the applicant, even if there is some term in the prospectus which says that he is bound by all these documents and contracts, even if they are not mentioned. So that will be void. Thirdly, 387 subsection 3 says that the form of application for the securities will always be attached with the prospectus. Exception is that if they are issued to underwriters. Then 387 won't apply except that the prospectus should be dated if the securities are issued to existing members or existing debenture holders through a right issue with or without right to renounce, and the securities are already quoted on the recognized stock exchange and similar securities are issued again. But in other cases, the provisions will apply. Plus, All other sections which might be penalty sections will apply along with section 387. So 387 does not limit other penalty sections. 388 is basically provisions as to experts' consent and allotment. So every prospectus should be having an expert's consent. So any expert, maybe a CA, company secretary, who will give his consent, who will give his statement and say that he consents to the prospectus. So the logic is every prospectus should contain that an expert statement giving his consent also. Now, if the prospectus states that this is a statement made by expert, which actually was not given by him, or he had given his statement and consent, but before registration of prospectus with the ROC, before the issue of prospectus, they have to register with the ROC. Before registration, he withdrew his consent, but still you have showed that he is still consenting, or he has given proper consent, he has given a statement, consent also. Then company should state that expert has given his statement and the consent is not withdrawn as on date. So if the expert gives the statement, still the company is obligated to write in the prospectus that the expert consent has been given and he has not withdrawn it. If he has not given, then don't state that in the prospectus that he is given, even if he has not given. Or if he has withdrawn that before the date of registration, also state that he has not given, because that acts as a consent not given. Then don't say that he has given. So they are saying ki, again, it's a negative section that no person shall issue a prospectus if the prospectus includes a statement stating that purporting to be made by an expert. It states that there is a statement which is made by expert which he has not given. That is the first case. So prospectus includes statement which actually he has not given. So they have just included a fake statement. That is, so you cannot issue prospectus if this is the case. Secondly, if before delivery of the prospectus for registration, he has withdrawn his consent. So his consent to the issue with the statement included in the form and context in which it is included. So he is saying has before delivery of the prospectus for registration withdrawn his written consent to the issue of prospectus with the statement included in the form and context in which it is included. So they are saying that before delivery for registration of the prospectus, he withdrew his consent. So we cannot issue the prospectus. And thirdly, if he has given his consent to the prospectus, then the company should write a statement that expert statement has come and he has not withdrawn his consent as on date. So even if that is not mentioned, prospectus cannot be issued. So basically, if you give a fake statement that this is expert statement, his consent is there, that is also the case of not issue of prospectus. Secondly, before issue the statement has been withdrawn, then also you cannot issue the prospectus. And thirdly, if he has given a proper statement, his consent is given to the prospectus, then the company should add a statement saying that expert's consent has been taken and it has not been withdrawn. So in these three cases, the prospectus might not be issued if they are not complying the three cases. Also, prospectus shall not be issued if it does not have the effect of compliance with section 33 and 40. That means 33 talks about what is 33? 33 is basically the application form shall be issued along with prospectus. So if a company is issuing application form, that has to be attached to prospectus, that is section 33. Section 40 is basically the company, if it is issuing prospectus, simultaneously it should apply for listing permission at minimum one stock exchange. And they should open an account in a scheduled bank to receive the money. So they should open a separate account where the monies will be received on the application. So if these two sections are not complied, you cannot issue the prospectus. Firstly, you are issuing application form without the prospectus. Secondly, 40 is basically you are not applied for listing permission. Then don't issue prospectus. So this section says that no company shall issue, no person shall issue a prospectus, no foreign company shall issue prospectus if the prospectus does not contain an expert statement or includes a false statement that expert has given his consent, or it does not contain because he has withdrawn his consent, or when he has given his consent, add a statement that he has given and not withdrawn. That should be a statement added that even when he has given a consent, just make additional statement that yes, statement has been given and he has not withdrawn till date. So only then they can issue prospectus. And secondly, if the company has not complied with section 3340, 33 talks about issuing application form along with prospectus, and 40 talks about applying for listing permissions at stock exchanges. Then you cannot issue prospectus. So if the prospectus does not have the effect where an application is made in pursuance thereof, of rendering all the persons concerned bound by all the provisions of section 33 and 40 so far as applicable. That means that a company has not complied with section 33 and 40, so the applicants might not be bound by the application. And subsection 2 says that for the purposes of this section, a statement shall be deemed to be included in a prospectus if it is contained in any report or memorandum appearing on the face thereof or by reference incorporated therein or issued therewith. Now, if you see a prospectus, if you ever see a prospectus, it is a huge document. Okay. We normally see only the first page. So it's a huge document. It is a almost a 200, 300 page document. It includes a lot of reports, management statements, and discussion, and a lot of things about the future of the company, what is the outlook, what is the risk involved, everything is there. Okay. So anywhere if there is a statement, anywhere, which looks like an expert statement, then this section will be applicable because it will be an expert statement. Then the company will have to add that expert statement has been taken and his consent has not been withdrawn till date, or they are giving a false statement that expert has given a statement but actually he has not, or he had withdrawn, still you are keeping the statement as it is. So statement can be anywhere in the prospect. That is what this section is saying. So statement can be contained in any report or any memorandum or whatever. Okay. So in the whole prospectus, it can be anywhere. So it will be still deemed to be expert statement if it is there. And if it is deemed as an expert statement, then all these provisions will be applicable. Then next is section 389, registration of prospectus. Now again, a basic section. Basically, any company who is going to issue prospectus in India, any foreign company who's going to issue a prospectus in India, will have to first register that prospectus with the ROC. So first register with the ROC along with additional documents attached, such as expert's consent, then copy of contracts or appointment of managing director or manager, any material contracts which are not in the ordinary course of business or in the last 2 years, underwriters agreement, and copy of power of attorney if the prospectus is signed by an agent of the directors. So basically, this section says that prospectus can be issued only after registration with the ROC. They are saying no person shall issue, circular, or distribute in India any prospectus offering for subscription in securities of a company incorporated or to be incorporated outside India, whether the company has or has not established, or when formed will or will not establish a place of business in India, unless before the issue, circulation, or distribution of the prospectus in India, a copy thereof certified by chairperson of the company. So it should be certified, a copy of the prospectus certified, signed by the chairperson, or sorry, signed by the chairperson and two other directors of the company, chairperson and two directors, as having been approved by resolution of the managing body, has been delivered for registration to the registrar. So a chairperson and any two directors who are approved by the board to sign the prospectus, managing body is the board, shall be delivered to ROC for registration. And the actual prospectus, when it is issued, shall state that a copy has been delivered to the ROC. And the prospectus states on the face of it that a copy has been so delivered, and there is on or attached to the copy any consent to the issue of the prospectus required by section 388. Consent is basically expert's consent, 388, and such documents as may be prescribed. So the following documents should be attached: consent to the issue of prospectus required from any person as an expert. So expert's consent, copy of contract for appointment of MD or manager, or if that contract is not in writing, then details of that contract, memorandum giving full details, copy of any material contracts which are not in the ordinary course of business of the company, entered within last 2 years, copy of underwriting agreement, copy of power of attorney if some other person is signing as an agent of the directors. Now, offer of Indian depository receipts. Now, what is the Indian depository receipt? Basically, for that you need to understand what is a American depository receipt or a global depository receipt, that is ADR or GDR, that Indian companies issue outside India. Similarly, foreign companies issue in India IDRs. Now, what is ADR? Now, suppose an Indian company wants to raise money in dollars, American dollars, for maybe their expansion in US or for any other reason. They need the money. What they will do? Firstly, they will appoint a banker. Okay. What they will do? They will appoint a banker. Now, that banker is called as a custodian bank. It is a custodian bank, they are called. So I'll appoint a bank in India. I'm talking about ADR. So as a company, I'll appoint a bank. I'll issue shares, normal Indian shares. I'll issue normal Indian shares to that bank, which will hold the securities. Then the bank will intimate a depository in America. A depository is a body which holds shares. Like in India, we have the NSDL and CDSL. The CDSL is Central Depository Services Limited. NSDL is National Services Depository Limited or National Securities Depository Limited, something like that. So basically, these are the depositories which hold securities. So whenever you buy shares, your shares will be held in the depository, either CDSL or NSDL. So what the Indian company will do? They will appoint a bank. It is called a custodian bank, whom they will issue the shares. The custodian bank will hold them. They will intimate a deposit in America, telling them that this company has issued so many shares to us. We are holding them. Now, against these shares, you issue ADRs in the American stock market. Now, ADRs are basically backed by these shares only. So ADRs will be like 1 ADR is equal to 10 Indian shares, or 1 ADR is equal to 5 Indian shares. So the the depository in the American territory will issue ADRs in the American stock market, and the investors in America can buy the ADRs. So, for example, if they are holding 1 ADR, so it will be represented by maybe 10 equity shares. So whatever the conditions of the ADR are, one ADR will be equal to 10 equity shares, or one ADR will be equal to 5 equity shares. So, and these ADRs, after they invest in, will be listed on the American stock market. So all the big companies like Infosys, Wipro, TCS, they have their ADRs listed on the American stock markets. So that helps in their expansion in the American markets also. So they can easily raise dollars there and they can list. So they can list as well in the American market, as well as they can do business in America. GDR is basically when you issue deposit receipts outside America, maybe in London, Singapore, that is called GDR. So any other currency apart from dollars is GDR. So again, what is happening? Company issues shares. So number of shares it wants to issue, they will issue to the bank. That is called a custodian bank. The bank will intimate the deposit in America that, see, these securities have been issued to us, these shares have been issued. Against that, you issue ADR in the American market so that the foreign investors will invest. So basically, what happens? The foreign investors who are sitting in America can also invest in Indian companies sitting there, and the currency is in dollars only. So for the Indian company, we get American investors. I get a foreign listing. I get dollars. And for the investor point of view, they can invest sitting in America and Indian companies. So they can also get the benefit of investing in Indian companies. So similarly, IDR, Indian deposit receipt, is ulta. Foreign company is coming to India. So foreign company is making a rupee issue. So whenever foreign company issues securities in India, it is called IDR. So what is happening? A foreign company, which is outside India, they will issue securities, shares basically, to a bank outside India, which will be their custodian bank. That custodian bank will intimate a depository in India, either CDSL or NSDL, to issue IDR in India. And investors like us can invest. And one IDR will be equal to, again, 10 shares of that company or 5 shares of that company. So we sitting in India can invest in foreign companies. That is the whole concept. So यहाँ पे basically the company, the custodian bank, and a depository. Depository will be in the foreign country, not in the same country as the company. Bank will be in the same country. So for the purpose of this section, and according to the company's registration of foreign company rules 14, the Indian deposit receipts means any instrument in the form of a deposit receipt. Deposit receipt basically it is backed by shares only. Okay, so one IDR will represent like 10 shares in that company. So they cannot directly issue shares. Okay, because they are a foreign company. They will issue IDR. Similarly, we cannot directly issue shares in the American stock exchange. So we will issue ADR. Means any instrument in the form of a deposit receipt created by a domestic depository in India and authorized by a company incorporated outside India making an issue of such deposit receipt. So it will be authorized by obviously the company to the bank. According to section 390, notwithstanding anything contained in any other law for the time being in force, the government will obviously make rules regarding the IDR, the offer of IDR, the requirement of disclosures in the prospectus, manner in which the IDR shall be dealt with in the depository mode and by custodian and underwriters, and manner of sale, transfer, or transmission of IDR. Obviously, it's a new security, so government has the full right to make rules. Similarly, when we issue ADR in America, their government has complete power to make rules regarding the ADRs. The rules will be because they want to protect the investors. Because now यहाँ पे foreign companies involved. Also, no company shall make an issue of IDR unless it complies with conditions of SEBI, ICDR regulations, that is issue of capital and disclosure requirements, and also directions of RBI. So SEBI, though, anyways, you have to comply with because it's a issue, and RBI also because you are a foreign company. Yes.
सर हे जे डिपॉझिटरी रीट्स आहेत त्याच्यामध्ये बाकीच्या गोष्टी कशा अफेक्ट होतात? म्हणजे आता मी सपोज बोनस इश्यू केला तर त्यांना पण मिळतो का? किंवा मला ह्याच्यात पण राईट इश्यू वगैरे असं जे आपण नॉर्मल शेअर्स
Yes,
मध्ये
yes,
करतो
yes, yes. They will also get the benefits. They will get dividend. They will get everything. They are also shareholders only. End of the day, they are also shareholders.
ओके सर.
Yeah.
आणि सर बॅलन्स शीट मध्ये कुठे दिसतं एक्झॅक्टली?
बॅलन्स शीट मध्ये काय म्हणतोय?
बॅलन्स शीट मध्ये म्हणजे शेअर कॅपिटलच दिसतं
Share capital. It's share
की
capital.
कशात
It's
म्हणजे?
share capital. Share capital. It is just called ADR, but it is share capital only. End of the day, because they are ADRs म्हणजे काय? They are backed by shares only. So company has issued those many shares which the bank is holding, against which shares are issued by the domestic, by the depository. So it is share capital only. So असं वेगळं दिसणार नाही की शेअर कॅपिटल आणि मग ADR असं दिसणार नाही. It is just an instrument through which the foreign investors can invest in the shares of the company. डायरेक्ट तुम्ही शेअर इश्यू नाही करू शकत ना, त्याच्यामुळे ADR थ्रू करा. So इथे माझ्याकडे एक डॉक्युमेंट आहे ADRचं, जस्ट टू अंडरस्टँड द प्रोसेस. हे बघा, दिसतंय ना सगळ्यांना डॉक्युमेंट?
येस सर.
हां, इफ यू अंडरस्टँड ADR ना, मग तुम्हाला GDR कळतं आणि तुम्हाला IDR कळतं. IDR इज बेसिकली अपोजिट, कारण बाहेरची कंपनी इंडियात येते. ADR मध्ये इंडियन कंपनी बाहेर चालली आहे अमेरिकेत. ओके, सो सी द चार्ट. इंडियन कंपनी ABC लिमिटेड, custodian in India, that is a bank. They retain custody of the rupee denominated equity shares issued by ABC. So basically, what the company is issuing? Equity shares. So it will be share capital only. End of the day, new share capital they are issuing. So they will issue shares. So suppose we want to raise around 100 crores. Okay. So up to the amount of 100 crores, I'll issue equity shares to the Indian bank, something like HDFC or ICICI. Then they will intimate a depository in America, their depository, who will issue ADR. So depository will issue dollar denominated ADRs to foreign investors. And once they apply for the ADRs, it will be traded on the New York Stock Exchange. That is how it will work. You can actually copy this if you want. Because once you know the concept now of ADR, then you will be sorted with GDR. GDR will be, instead of dollars, it will be any other currency. And it will be listed on another stock exchange, maybe London Stock Exchange or Luxembourg or Singapore, something like that. So outside America, when an Indian company is issuing, it is called GDR. When they are issuing in America, it is called ADR. And when a foreign company is issuing such things in a depository listed in India, it is called IDR. You can copy this. So basically, Indian company is issuing shares, and indirectly, the foreign investors can get to invest in Indian company indirectly, because ADRs will represent equity shares only. Okay, should I go back?
सर एक मिनिट.
This was again there in CA Inter, if you remember. ADR, GDRs were there. Okay, done.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, basically, application of 34 to 36. Basically, section 34 to 36 talk about liabilities for misstatement in prospectus. Okay, so same will be applicable to foreign company and also to IDR issue. So you can see here, section 34 deals with criminal liability for misstatement in prospectus. Section 35 deals with civil liability for misstatement in prospectus. Civil liability is basically because of your misstatement in the prospectus or some error in the prospectus or wrong statement in the prospectus, the investors suffered a loss, they will sue you for the loss. That is a civil liability. You will have to pay up the loss. Criminal liability is where the government will sue you for imprisonment and fine. And section 36 deals with punishment for fraudulently inducing persons to invest money. That is again a penal provision. Might lead to imprisonment or fine or both. So these sections, which are normally applicable to Indian companies, will also be applicable to foreign companies when they issue prospectus or in the issue of IDR. So according to subsection 1, provisions of 34 to 36, both inclusive, shall apply to issue of prospectus by a company incorporated outside India as they apply to prospectus by an Indian company, and also to issue of IDR by foreign company. Also, subsection 2 provides that subject to provisions of section 376, 376 is basically winding up provision for a foreign company. Under 376, foreign company can be wound up. The provisions of chapter 20 shall apply mutatis mutandis for closure of place of business of a foreign company in India as if it were a company incorporated in India in case such foreign company has raised monies through offer or issue of securities which have not been repaid or redeemed. So if the company, a foreign company has issued shares and securities and they are not able to pay back the money, then the company can be wound up under section 376 as if it is an Indian company. So even foreign companies can be wound up in India. Then this is a penalty provision. Now this they have summarized here. Basically, 392 says that punishment for contravention. So if basically all the provisions given are not complied by a foreign company, then the company will be liable to pay fine. Also, the officers of the companies will be liable to imprisonment or fine or both. So punishment for contravention is listed in these 3 points. Fine on defaulting company in range of 1 lakh to 3 lakh. So minimum 1 lakh, maximum 3 lakhs. Plus continuing default 50,000 per day till the default continues if they are not complying anything. Then punishment for every officer of the foreign company who is in default shall be imprisonment maximum 6 months or fine of minimum 25,000 or both imprisonment and fine. And the fine can extend to 5 lakhs also. So 25,000 to 5 lakhs or both imprisonment and fine. Now they are saying that company doesn't comply with the provisions of this chapter. That doesn't affect any contracts which it has entered. So if the company is not complying with any provisions which are mentioned above, still whatever contracts it has entered with third parties, the third parties can sue them. The third parties can sue them. They can institute legal proceedings against the company. But this foreign company cannot sue them in return till it is complying all the provisions. That is what this section is. So basically, if the company fails in complying the provisions, they will not have any rights against third party, but third party can sue them in discharge of any contract. So any failure by company to comply with the provisions of this chapter shall not affect the validity of any contract, dealing or transaction entered into by the company or its liability to be sued in respect thereof. Contract will be on, plus the other party can sue them. However, company shall not be entitled to bring any suit, claim set off, make any counterclaim, or institute any legal proceeding in respect of any such contract, dealing, or transaction until they have complied with the provision. So they cannot do anything. They cannot make counterclaim also. So, but the third party will sue you. So similar to when the partnership firm is not registered, the third parties can sue you, but you cannot sue them until you comply with all the provisions. So basically, you need to comply with all the provisions. So we have finished foreign company.